I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and today we're going to dye two pretty different yarn bases, although the fiber contents are the same, but they look very different. We're going to dye these two yarn bases in the same type of way, just to have some fun, and because these are the bases I feel like dyeing today. Now, the two yarn bases that I have here are Knit Pick Stroll Fingering Weight yarn. This very sparkly yarn is 70% fine superwash merino wool, 25% nylon, and 5% stellina. This fun black and white yarn I have is a zebra yarn from Wool to Die For. This particular one is 80% superwash merino wool, 20% nylon. I will link to both of the yarn bases down in the video description. I am a Knit Picks affiliate, so I may earn a commission if you make a purchase through one of my links. And there's really no rhyme or reason for dyeing them both the same way in this video. This is something I tend to do sometimes when I'm doing like a big bonus mystery colorway or something. And I honestly just had a desire to dye some yarn. And so that's exactly what we're gonna do right now. Before we go and pre-soak our yarn, I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to today's lab partner, Cindy. Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. The first thing we need to do is pre-soak everything, and I'm planning on doing something a little bit saturated today. So I'm going to use some of my removable nylon zip ties that are dark. These are very much likely to bleed onto the yarn, which is okay. It's not a problem because, again, I'm planning on adding dark colors, and therefore it doesn't matter if a little bit of color comes out of this because we'll be covering it up. I do like to hang on to these zip ties. I'll sometimes use them for resists or other things. And really the time when I see color transfer from the zip ties onto the yarn tend to be more when I let it pre-soak for days versus a quicker pre-soak like we're about to do. I am just gonna add some plain water, cool room temperature water with no acid for our pre-soak. Now both of these yarns happen to be pretty absorbent, which means that they soak up the water really easily. Now, I'm not going for super even color coverage because we're dyeing something variegated, but if you really want to try to get a really more even coverage, I would recommend doing a longer pre-soak, like one overnight. I probably could go ahead and be ready to dye the yarn right now. I don't think I would need to wait the 30 minutes that I'm planning to, but may as well wait 30 minutes. It'll let it be a little more saturated. So then we're ready to go and add our colors. There are 5 different colors I am planning on playing with today. We have 1% stock solutions in 4 colors: Derma Acidized Emerald Green, Electric Violet, Intense Iris, and over here we have some True Black. Then I also have a 0.5% stock solution of Caribbean Blue. Now, I'm not planning on measuring the amount of dye that I'm adding. I'm going to measure with my heart. And so we'll see what we end up with. We'll see if I decide to blend everything together or let things stay more where I've placed them. I just want to have some fun and create something beautiful that makes me happy, because I'm really just in the mood to play with color. I'm playing around with shoeboxes today. I have been doing this so much this year. It's still 2025 when I'm filming this. I just love the way that I can play with colors like this, and I can set up a lot while my stove is busy working on other projects. It works super well for me. Now, what I like to do with these is something I call cold process. So I'm going to set up the yarn and the dye, eventually add acid, however we go about that. And then I'm going to let it sit at room temperature for 24, 48 hours, at which point we'll go ahead and steam set everything to let those colors set. This allows me, with dyeing yarn in my kitchen, to set up multiple projects, work on multiple videos in one day, whereas otherwise I'm much more limited by my heat sources. Now, there's no reason why you have to do it in a literal plastic shoebox like I'm doing. You could use a large plastic under the bed storage container where you could have the yarn spread out more. I could set this up in one of my catering steam pans and let it sit overnight. You have options. I just enjoy using these. They're cheap, and so it's an easy way to play around with color. I am gonna add 8 cups of water to each of these shoe boxes. Why 8 cups? Well, it's really easy for me to measure it out with one of these large jars that I use whenever I measure out 8 cups of water. It is a volume that I know covers the yarn well and allows me to move some of the dyes through while also having the yarn really fill the space. So that way the movement of the colors is something I have control over if I want. But you could definitely use less, you could use more. Yeah, I guess there isn't like a huge reason behind it, but I just need to wait for our yarn to finish pre-soaking and then we'll come bring it in. Okay, let's bring over our yarn, and while we're over here, I'm checking and I see no color transfer from the zip tie. Not every dark zip tie will transfer color. It depends a bit on the pigments that you used and things like that. Now I'm sort of just sloppily adding it in. Even though we're gonna dye 200 grams of yarn in each container, there will be differences between, well, all 4 skeins for sure, but also the 2 that are within the same container, just because of little differences in how I add the yarn and then scrunch things down. That can just have little micro differences, right? And we'll still end up with something super beautiful though. Okay. Now, most of the time I'll add color just like very much horizontally across. And I don't know if that's entirely what I'm gonna do today. I'm gonna add a little bit of Caribbean blue, sort of in this like middle area. I'll add a little bit more. Let's add a tiny bit down here at the bottom, if I can. Have I used this up? Just about. There's a tiny bit left in this container. We're not gonna worry about that. I'm just feeling like making things up a little bit as I go along. All right, I've got my emerald green. And I'm gonna come a little bit on either side of these blues. I'm not adding that much. And here, there's already blending. Things are gonna spread. It's all okay. We're just doing it a little bit differently. Now, my tap water is slightly acidic, so I do sometimes see colors start to strike to my yarn before I've even added acid. And we have no acid in here. Now I'm coming in with my true black acid dye, adding that one all the way across. There's not that much in here, so I'm trying to be a little consistent. Now sometimes what I choose to do is like just let things sit for a long period of time. Sometimes I do things in, I guess, many different ways. I don't know. Just depends on my mood. All right, this intense iris, which hopefully, I was shaking it, didn't go anywhere. Let's add it to the top. This is a color that is not particularly soluble. And I don't know if you can see that it almost looks a little bit like shimmery, like I was adding mica or something. That's because some of the powder is a suspension, but it should, in the end, all go in without too much of an issue. At least that has been my experience. And now finally, let's add our electric violet, which is one of my favorite colors, and also it's no longer the most expensive acid dye color on Dharma's website. It's definitely one of the most expensive colors on the Dharma Acid Dyes website. Oh man. Now we've added the colors on such a surface level that they are not going through very many layers. Like, okay, on the zebra I see it going down a little bit more. On the Stroll Glimmer, not so much. So I think what I'm gonna do right now is work the colors through like a little bit. We still have no acid. I am just coming on some of these colors. I did the black first, and I'm just trying to work it through a little bit. Notice I'm leaving our emerald green and Caribbean blue alone, So sometimes I like to wait and let like gravity and diffusion do its thing. But that is something that is worth doing if you don't mind like having like some more whites left behind. And there could be pastels on the other side. We can always add more color, but this at least is going to work these colors through a little bit. Now, the most recent time I played around with this was for Hanukkah 2025. And there I worked all the colors through, then added acid and moved it pretty quickly. And I'm just sitting here kind of feeling on the fence about what I want to do. And you know what? I'm not going as far down because I kind of want to keep some of that coloration maybe, but why not work it through a little bit? I do think I want to let things sit for a tiny bit before I add acid and like manipulate anything. I'm flying by the seat of my pants, which is something that is very, very fun to do because I really like these results. I do want to blend and move things a little bit because I'd like to avoid a ton of pastel patches. I know the longer that I let it sit, the more colors will start to bind to our yarn, even though, once again, we've not added acid to it yet. Let's go ahead and set a timer for 10 minutes. But I also know this particular yarn is one that absorbs color very quickly. And once I add acid, the colors are going to sink in pretty quickly, with the exception of the emerald green and Caribbean blue. Now, I could have done this in like a more completely random way and poured the colors, sort of like I did with the green and blue, poured the colors even more randomly around. The reason why I didn't is that it's harder to do when you're pouring from the dye stock containers, but also, since we have two skeins in here, the way I've done it, they're sort of mirror images of each other, so we're more likely to have sort of like a matched pair within each container. If I had been completely random, we would have seen more differences between the two skeins dyed in the same container, which isn't a bad thing. It's just sort of a reality that we can have there. Now, I'm not lifting anything up. I do see some more pastel patches and light patches, but more of the yarn is exposed to color than what we have before. And so I'm talking a lot when really I should just let the timer wait and then we can move things. But I am digging this. I love it. And part of me wouldn't want to move things around more, except for the fact that I know it's not going to be that saturated all the way down and all the way through. And that's why I'm going to move and blend and make things like more blended, I think. But I'm talking more than I'm doing. I'll see you in 8 minutes now when the timer goes off. Okay, now that I'm here, I'm thinking of an experiment I'd want to do. One where I move things right away, one where I wait 10 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, just to see if we observe any differences. I think that could be fun. But I'm gonna add 1, 2, 3 tablespoons of white vinegar. And now I'm immediately going to lift up the yarn. It's very long. See, you can see some more pastel areas on the back, and then lower it back down, sort of scrunch it down. Okay, and this has blended things a lot. We still have a lot of different colors in here. It is gorgeous, but because we've moved things, it means we're more likely to have color all over. But you can see some of the places that are lighter evened out a bit. Now, Intense Iris is a color as we go ahead and do this one. 1, 2, 3. That seems to show up more when we do like our whole cold process thing than maybe it does originally. I'm flipping this around. Yeah, I can see some lighter patches on the back, which is not a bad thing. It's just that when I did this with like teal, a lot of those greens like disappeared in the end, which was really, really funny. Now, another thing you may notice is that, okay, we still have a substantial amount of color there. Okay, fine. Things were looking a little bit, well, they are way more clear over on the stroll than they are over here, which is interesting, and this is a hard comparison to make. Things are gonna feel darker over here because we had the black in there already. But yeah, it's just a sense of how much dye is left in the water, how much dye maybe already struck to part of the yarn versus didn't. But I still think, and it would need to be all with the one same yarn base, that waiting different amounts of time before moving it and seeing what differences we do and do not see could be very interesting. But anyway, I've already talked about my plans for cold processing, and I am very excited to see how these guys are going to turn out. So I'm gonna go ahead and set these aside, and then I'll see you in a couple of days where we'll come back, see our yarn, and then steam set it to finish the process. It has been 24 hours at room temperature in my home, which is like mid-60s. There are times when I might wait like 48 hours or something, but I don't think that we need to do that. And confirmation. Ooh, this is so saturated. Oh, I love it. Oh my gosh, we are, okay, what you're seeing on camera is way more overexposed than what I'm seeing in person, I feel, but the greens and the teals, oh, I love it. I'm popping this one into my steamer basket before pulling out the sparkle. Now, by nature, yeah, we have some areas that are a bit lighter in here because this one has the silver. Ooh, but look at the stellina pop against the dark. Oh my gosh. Better zoom in so you can see. Look at that silver pop in there. Oh my goodness. But because the other one had the black in it, it will feel darker overall no matter what. I'm also going to pop this one into my steamer basket because I'm going to want to steam everything for 30 minutes. But I just wanted to point out there's maybe a touch of a little bit of blue left in here. But really, the dye baths were clear. Now, you might wonder, why bother heating it if the dye baths are clear? There are pigments that do need the heat to really get in there and bind to the yarn, and doing that 30-minute steam makes me feel more confident that the colors are going to stay where we've placed them. And so, yeah, it makes me feel better. There have been like a handful of times that I've done solar dyeing with food coloring, and then there's been so much bleeding in the end. And I think, you know, sometimes we just need to hit that temperature. But anyway, I will see you in 30 minutes when we're ready to remove everything from the steamer basket. It has been 30 minutes. Woo! Look at that sparkle. So I've shown in the past that you can boil stellina, oh look at that sparkle, in straight vinegar, and it will not dull the shine. But if you have citric acid, then it will sort of dissolve part of the metallic sparkle of the stellina. It was really wild. But anyway, so having a long, like overnight, couple day soak in vinegar should not harm your sparkle at all. But this is so pretty. So, so, so pretty. Okay. I'm gonna set all the yarn aside to cool completely. I'm gonna turn off my steamer basket. And then once everything is cool, we'll go ahead and wash it and cross our fingers for no bleeding. Let's wash our yarn all together. I am digging this like midnight and green, feeling like foresty, enchanted. Although it's weird to feel foresty when there's no brown, huh? But I am loving it. And the contrast between either like the zebra striping that we have here or the sparkle we have there, it's just so fun. Now, a lot of times when I do, I'm gonna add some dish soap now, mystery colorways or mystery pre-orders, whether it's for, well, not so much for Hanukkah, but whether it's for the Spring Mini Skein mini series or for Valentine's Day or Black Friday or whatever, a lot of times I'll dye the same colorway on different yarn bases. Now, they're not always as diverse as these two, because these two are quite different, but it's fun to do the same technique and the same colors and to see how things feel similar and different. Because sometimes if it's just different fiber contents, then you can learn things about how different brands or different blends absorb color. But then other times it's how, you know, if you have a completely different type of yarn, you can get such a different feel even with the same technique and colorway. And so there's just a lot to play with. But the best news here is we've got no color bleeding. So therefore, I'm gonna finish rinsing out the soap, pop the yarn into my spin dryer to remove a bunch of the liquid, and then we'll hang it up to dry and come back and see the finished yarn. I'm sitting here setting up for conclusions, and I'm trying to figure out how to lay it out as it was dyed. But then I realized this side was underneath, this side was on top in the shoebox. And so, yes, this is accurate. Now that we have everything laid out, our zebra yarn is absolutely more saturated than our sparkle. But I don't think it's just because of the black that was in here already. Yes, there's some areas of pastel here. Some of the lightest areas match over here. But we have more pastel in our stroll than we do over here on our Sheila's, I think it's Sheila's Gold Zebra or something like that. This is consistent with some of the things I found with comparing stroll to, say, platinum that have the same fiber contents on paper. Stroll seems to absorb color a little bit faster. And that, I think, is what gives us some of the difference. Now, another thing that could give some difference is the fact that this, the Stroll Glimmer, the skeins have, like, because I think the yardage is the same between both. These skeins are thicker because they're not as long. And so that can add like a different type of resist into how the yarn is dyed. But within the same pot, I found colors strike faster and maybe can feel more vibrant at times on our sparkle. And that's just an observation I've made. Now, it's really hard if we're looking from far away, but even in the deepest, most black sections, you can see some of that barber pulling still. And I have, in fact, dip dyed or over dyed this yarn in black dye. And if you think about it, the black yarn is going to absorb dye as well. And so that's going to get that much darker. And so you'd have to use so much pigment to get that contrast to go away entirely. And I think that it just adds like a little element of fun. Because since the yarn is spun with one of the plies being black, white, and a little bit gray, and is repeating, the barber pulling sections can pool in a way, but then the color you dye over it could also pool in a way, giving you some really fun combinations. But now I'm gonna go twist everything up. I love playing around with different yarn bases and dyeing them side by side. It's really fun to see how things may feel similar and then still very different in the end. Cindy, thank you so much for being my lab partner for today's episode of Dyepot Weekly. I really hope that you're going to love your yarn. And if you at home would like to learn more about becoming a last-minute lab partner, like Cindy, go and check out the listings in the ChemKnits Creations Etsy shop. I've already started filming videos for our last-minute lab partners, but you can look through a list of videos I am currently working on and pick one to bump it up the queue, and then I'll film some shout-outs for you to include in the video itself. I'll have everything linked down in the video description. Cindy, thank you again. There is one huge downside of filming inclusions, like within a few days after dyeing the yarn, but when I've dyed a lot of yarn in between. Because I've not started editing the video yet, and therefore I can't remember when I added acid into the whole process. If I added acid while I let it sit before I move it or not. Because sometimes when I do this type of technique, the colors blend a lot, and sometimes you lose some of the colors in the middle. Other times I do this, you can see a lot of distinct hues, whether or not you have more contrast between the most saturated and least saturated areas, or you have slightly more blending and coverage overall. Both are fun. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and I love to play with all different types of colors and yarn and dyes and techniques and share the process with all of you. And a lot of times through just playing with color and techniques, I learn so much, and it's really shaped me as an artist. So to the best of your ability, the best way to learn how to dye yarn is to play. And you can play not using 400 grams of yarn like I used in this video. you can play using 3 grams of yarn at a time, and that's what I did in my earliest experiments. So just throwing that out there, that you don't need to use as much yarn when you're playing, and you can do a cold process technique like this using a much smaller container if you're using less yarn, and you can still have a lot of fun and play. Please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new video. I post at least twice a week, and we have so much fun over here. And if you are looking for other ways to help support the content here, you can go and check out the ChemKnits Patreon. I offer some really cool perks for patrons, including behind the scenes access, early access to some content, and more. You can find more details over at patreon.com/ChemKnits. I am Rebecca from ChemKnits, and thank you so much for watching.